Welcome back to the FloTrack Podcast. I'm Kevin. He's Lincoln. FloTrackPodcast@gmail.com. On today's show, we are not going to assign a player rating for all 750 American athletes. That was yesterday. So if you're tuning in for that, go back one episode. My congrats to you, Lincoln, for surviving that episode. Well done, sir.
Yeah, I towed the line between just making fun of Gordon for having no life for doing this and treating it like a legitimate pursuit. You do have to fill an hour, so I did like debating the complete semantics of why some athletes got a 99, why some got a 98, and God knows Gordon can talk about it forever, so we squeezed out an hour from it.
I want to know, why didn't he make this international, right? There's a huge market internationally that he's not tapping into, and then that would make it even harder to get a 99, and that way you would recognize people in the 80s, whereas with the American athletes, they got down to like 91 and you're like, I have no idea who that person is.
Right. That's why I said I think that's a fun pursuit. You go through and you get, things start to get a little fuzzy around 93 for me, so it does make it real tough. And then by 75, all the way at the bottom, he made up every single one of those names. I'm absolutely convinced by that. There were some names that were not real, letters that have never been next to each other before, let alone at a track meet. I do think that would have been a lot more fun. Get Safan Hassan in there, get Shawnee Miller-Weibo, and then Miller-Weibo. That would have been really, really fun. And if you keep those same parameters where you only have 6 athletes, then it gets really tough to crack each of those 99 clubs.
We should not have made fun of this because this sounds like a great content idea for next week.
Yeah.
Why do we mock Gordon? I want to make World Athletics 2021 from EA Sports coming to a gaming console, because then you leave off people who won gold medals, right? Then you're deciding between gold medalists for 99. You're not just saying, well, they all got a gold, so then they go on. I'm not saying Gordon took the easy way out, because goodness, he ranked 798 athletes or whatever it was. But I'd like to see the international version as well too. I did like when he said, hey, I snuck a couple athletes in here. Can you guess who they were? And I thought you were going to say everybody in the 70s. But instead it was Tui. Instead it was the high schoolers.
I just know how he operates at this point. It was an excuse to get probably Nico Young in there so as he could send it to Mike Smith and see what's your reaction. Because Gordon is on a text thread with at least 5 different coaches every day. I think he wakes up and texts Carl Lewis if he doesn't already have a text yet. And then it's Mick Byrne if he needs any Wisconsin news. I guess that's going. And then it's Mike Smith the rest of the day. So listen, I know the way he operates now, and it all makes sense through prisms of pursuits like ranking 800 athletes.
Mm-hmm. I find it very hard to believe that Mike Smith would know what EA sports like games are. He just does not seem like a gamer to me.
Yeah, I could see that. I guess I could not see that. I'm trying to think of what the tagline is for a fake video game, because you can't say if it's in the game, it's in the game, because there's not a game.
Right. So, if it's in the race, it's in the race.
Yeah.
If it's in the event, it's in the event. If it's in the call room, it's in the call room. If it's the start line.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah. You guys were thinking, like, how would you make that game work? I think a marathon video game could actually work, because aren't people really into these very intricate role-playing games where they create whole worlds and universes for themselves? You sort of I guess how The Sims started long time ago. I mean, budgeting which gels you take when, and figuring out when to surge and when to go with the lead pack. It seems like a game you could really invest a lot of time into. Yeah. You never would have told me 15, 20 years ago that people would be interested in playing these super long Odyssey games, or like trading coconuts with other people on, or whatever people do in Animal Crossing, or whatever that stuff is. Like that, you never would have thought that would have been what people would be playing in the year 2020.
So you could run fast times and unlock things like the Alpha Flies and Klaus, and the ability to train with Eliud Kipchoge. Who knows what
like
else,
a better hotel room the night before.
Yeah.
You've unlocked it. Get interviewed by Lincoln after the race, and then it's just you screaming at him. Did you think you blew it? Who is this guy?
It's a rite of passage, and people know I'm not going to be lobbing up softballs.
No, right down the middle. Right down the middle. You ask people if they're going to meet any showrunners when they go to Japan.
Yep. This has been a very esoteric start to this podcast. Okay, go ahead.
No, well, we can back up. We can tell people. We can let people inside. Lincoln once famously asked Noah Lyles because he's into anime, if he plans when he goes to Tokyo for the Olympics, if he's going to meet with any showrunners there. And what did he say? I just started laughing when he asked the question.
He said no. He tried to entertain the question. He's like, no, I just thought Japan, he's really into anime. I mean, if we think back to USA's last summer, he was putting silver in his hair.
You're running out of questions?
Yeah, it was like minute 7 of a semifinal interview, I think. That one should have been over by 3 minutes before, but I just went for it.
Yeah. Well, we always joke about how you don't always have to ask a question, especially with the big name athletes when there's so many questions being thrown their way. But sometimes people feel the need, and I've done it too. You're just like, man, I gotta feel like I'm doing something here. What about the showrunners? No. And that's how you end up with that question, which we have not stopped laughing about.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? Maybe he ends up in an episode of Dragon Ball Z. I don't know. I have no idea. And then he'll be like, remember that time that guy asked me about showrunners? And now maybe he'll tweet out a selfie here with the showrunners.
Yeah. There is a certain level of track fame that you get to where people just ask you a million unrelated questions just because you are the quote unquote star. And then they want to just do a bunch of people want to do a profile on you, and it is going to go in a million different directions. You don't know what exactly they're focused on. So then they're throwing questions about like, what's your mom like? Or did you ever play football? Or do you sing on the side? Like all that stuff. So then the interview, contrast that with an interview of just like a random person winning, or not a random person, but like when Centrowitz wins, it's like, okay, Centrowitz wins. Here's the questions about the race, questions about how he thinks he's going to do in the Olympics, blah, 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 blah. But with someone like Lyles or someone else where it's like, okay, this person's the star. You have like 10 people around them asking them questions they're just trying to dig for anecdotes. So they're just out there just lobbing Hail Marys in minute 9 about it.
Yeah.
Like, what's the inspiration for your dance?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, it's fun to try to guess like when you can see where people are going with their content or their stories. Like, yeah, oh, that's a third paragraph anecdote they're looking to pepper in. Like, what's your favorite restaurant in Des Moines? What did you talk to the waitress? Like, it's just like it's always stuff like that. But I see, I'm my intentions. I'm not asking that for a story. I'm just asking that because I feel like asking that. There's no intent. Like I said, I may have said on the show before, I asked Mondo Duplantis a question one time in Doha without a camera on him or any recording device. I just asked it for the sake of asking.
I've done that before.
Yeah.
You just wanted to know. Because sometimes it's just the interview's over and then you're like, oh man. And then they end up saying something better than they did when the camera was on. And that's when it sucks. You're like, oops, I probably should have kept this rolling. But sometimes your questions pay off. Like when you asked Ryan Krauser if the cowboy hat is an underrated hat. That one I would have laughed at, but then in retrospect, that's aged very well.
I think so. I mean, that one was planned. I knew I was going to ask a silly question to him. And I've done that with Michael Norman as well before. I asked him about if he got his fish flown in for Des Moines from California or something. I don't know.
Hopefully I'm not. I'll say that one was a miss.
Yeah, he didn't understand the question. I try to balance the seriousness and goofiness of the job of trying to cover track and field. It's kind of a silly pursuit, anyways.
I brought up a Central earlier. I wanted to report on his Instagram because last night he posted something and I sent it to you, and it was a picture of him and it said, I can't change the direction of the wind, but I can adjust my sails to always reach my destination. And you were wondering, well, what did that What did that mean? Yes, exactly. Because he hasn't run in any of these BTC meets. I sent it to somebody who I thought might know the answer, and they said, well, I don't think that means he left the group, Bowerman, because this person had talked to someone who had seen them running with the entire BTC group a couple hours ago. And then this morning, or late last night, I'm not sure, he posted this on Instagram on a story. To my followers, continuing to ask if I have left Bowerman, the answer remains the same. No, I appreciate everyone's concern. Jerry and I are equally excited about my future and what I've been able to accomplish with the group under minimal training. The group's recent successes have been nothing but inspiring and motivating for not just me, but for the entire track world. I've enjoyed the team camaraderie this group exemplifies, and I look forward to logging many more miles with my Bowerman bros. So there you go. There's the answer.
Wow.
Maybe he was literally talking about sailing.
There's a chance that he's picked that hobby up.
He's got a regatta later. Is that what that's called?
And
Regatta?
I think so. You're right. He could have getting out on those. What I don't know where Portland is in Oregon. What portion of the state? But he's getting out in those waters of Portland, the North Oregon waters, and setting sail and
on the Willamette.
You know, maybe he didn't have any good photos of himself sailing. He just had to go with his usual running content. I don't know. Yeah, that was a significant thread on the old Let's Run thread boards or whatever they're called about him potentially leaving. I think there was some rumors he deleted a bunch of social media posts. Apparently, I mean, we all know that's a crime that is worthy of persecuting someone for. No, but I guess that grew that rumor grew enough to where he felt he needed to address it. But I guess good to hear he's still with Bowerman. You wouldn't want your Olympic champion leaving a solid team in the run up to another Olympic Games.
Well, they got 2 more meets scheduled, so we'll see. Maybe he'll make an appearance at one of these last 2. The famous, as you've noted, Bowerman Inter Squad 3 and Bowerman Inter Squad 4. Never squatting.
Yeah, never stop, never squatting.
Yeah. Let's talk NCAA briefly, because after you and Gordon got done recording your absolutely amazing podcast yesterday, the Wisconsin Nuttycombe Invitational was canceled, unfortunately. Now, those of you who don't know that meet, aren't familiar with the meet, that is the main regular season meet. That is a huge portion of the cross country season. If you were trying to qualify for the NCAA meet, that meet and the pre-nationals meet serve as the main tickets to that meet, other than qualifying through your regional, which obviously is important as well. But I think this was predictable once the Big Ten said that they were going to conference only, because then you're hosting a meet where 1 million conferences are attending.
Yeah. It was to be expected after last week, where the Big Ten announced that they were going only in conference. But at the same time, it's like the full weight of the impact of this didn't hit until it was announced that Nuttycombe was being canceled. Because I was thinking, if pre-nationals is somehow canceled, like the whole format of the NCAA season is entirely different. And we've got to come up with on the fly a different way to build an NCAA field. Now, the bigger point, of course, is there's a really good chance we don't have a season period, but the pre-nationals meet can absorb all these teams that would have gone to Wisconsin. And I know a lot of them are going to end up going in conference, but it was just a huge reminder and a neon sign that it almost seems like it's going to be impossible to clear all the logistics to make this a season that even resembles anything like we've seen in the past. Not to mention that the fact that the biggest goal is avoiding mass outbreaks and keeping student athletes and the people that are around them healthy. I don't know how this is possible. And I put in the article that I just quickly wrote. Yes, I understand that the Big Ten already said in conference. So you could have said, well, this was predictable. But to me, you remove this meet and you can't ask pre-nationals to take on all these teams, especially during a pandemic. So then what is the season really? Are we just having dual meets and no NCAAs? How do you pick an NCAA field? You could say, well, we can pick, we know NAU would have made it. We know Stanford would have made it on the women's side, yada, yada, yada. But that's not really a fair format. I'm just saying you're wiping this meet out and you realize truthfully how it was a backbone of the entire system, the NCAA, the way they choose a field. So I know we knew, I guess, this was coming, but to see it officially put pen to paper, it validated, or it really showed me that I don't think there's any way that there's a season that culminates in an NCAA championships like that we're used to seeing with 31 teams. I just, how do you do it without just subjectively choosing teams? I mean, that I don't know what it can possibly look like. I'm sure Gordon has an answer, but when you remove this meet and you're asking pre-nationals, I guess, to take all the other teams on, it's almost impossible to do it the way we've become accustomed to having cross country.
I think if given the choice now, I think people would take, hey, let's just take a couple teams out of each region and move it forward that way. Because what I'm hearing from coaches, the feeling is just incredibly pessimistic that there's going to be a season, right? So yeah. I think if things break so that there can be a season, I think people would just be so thrilled that there would be a season that I don't think there would be much quibbling over how do we get the at-large bids. I just think that would be the 100th biggest concern. I think the season in general is in peril, which isn't anything new. We're hearing rumors that the Big East is going to go conference only, but this just feels like a step towards the inevitable. I don't know. Have you been reading about football, college football, and just like the anonymous quotes that are being stated by Power 5 ADs and Power 5 football coaches? It's just they are extremely pessimistic, and there was some sentiment earlier about moving football to the spring. The SEC, I believe, doesn't want to do that because that would be, in their mind, tough to do. Okay, a spring season and then come back again in the fall of 2021. But the quotes that are being printed by powerful people and people in the know in the most influential sport in the NCAA are painting a extremely bleak picture of the likelihood that this is happening. And I think a lot of this is just drip, 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 drip. And then eventually it's just going to be the entire thing.
And that's the biggest thing. It's not following necessarily what the Nuttycombe Invitational does. Follow what football does, and that's going to clearly trickle down to cross country. The whole in conference thing has really never made sense. I mean, you're still going to be, if you would truly have, like, let's imagine like you have a mid-season meet like a Nuttycombe that would assemble all your conference teams. So it'd basically be conference, pre-conference, and then conference. You're still getting a lot of bodies together, and this is assuming we could, again, I sound like a broken record, but we can have athletes on campus, student athletes on campus. I just don't see it. I feel like the in-conference thing is to me feels like punting on making a full decision, like buying yourself some time to put out that hope that we could have a season while we figure out another, permanent solution. Because I just feel like, and that's fine if they think that that's a solution. I don't see how that's a realistic thing. Now, I know Nuttycombe, you're talking about 400 kids on a start line, and if you did it with a conference meet, it could be 100, and that's like, well, statistically, that's much safer.
I think it's just stalling,
but still, your pockets around the country for cross country meets, you're going to have 40 cross country meets a weekend. of which there's 100 kids, and it adds up to the same amount of bodies, even if the travel isn't as much. I don't think you're making it necessarily incrementally safer or exponentially safer. I just think, like I said, that this is we're pushing this down the road a little bit until we get to August, until we got to make a hard decision on this, because nothing is set. I mean, we have no idea with cross country. Coaches don't seem to know. Coaches know a little bit more than we do, but they're not the ones who are making the calls. It's all at the top, and obviously those decisions are dictated by what they want to do with football. It's just not going to be safe. I mean, I'm sorry. I know people want this. I'm not an expert, but we know it's not going to be safe. Yeah, are 18 to 22-year-olds likely to die? No, but you're still going to get the virus and pass it on. We've handled this thing horribly, and are we going to continue to have this? It's just, I mean, at this stage, if we're trying to, I just think anything we're doing right now in 2020, we're taking away from 2021, right? And we're going to get to the point where we're like, can we have are the Olympics going to get? Are we willing to have a small cross country season and do all these sports right now in this weird format, and then we're going to still have numbers, and then we're going to have to be debating, can we even do the Olympics in 2021 because of look how bad this still is. That's what I don't get. Just call it a year. 2020, it's been a good one, and by a good one I mean an absolutely nightmarish, horrible one. Let's try this again next year when things are much different. I just think we're forcing the issue.
Well, I think a lot of people would agree with you on that. And, going back to March, February, even, people were saying, hey, the messaging then should have been, if you want your kids to be back in school in August and September, these are the precautions we need to take now, so that way school doesn't happen. But it feels like it's been a series of half measures, and now we are a month out of school, and we're seeing what that picture is. You could say the exact same thing for sports. And in the case of the NCAA, sports is linked to school. And K through 12 schooling is in a way linked to university schooling, right? Because there's similar practices in place in terms of, is it safe? And you could say, okay, 10 and under is different than 18 to 22. But when you talk about opening a high school, opening a college campus, operating in similar cities, similar health regulations, right? It's all part of the big picture of, you can't, when you're having massive outbreaks, it's hard to do sports. And the NBA might be able to do it because they spent $150 million to inoculate themselves from all of this, to create a literal I use the word literal, not literally, but almost literally,
not literal,
a bubble. But it is, but in a way, it like the regulations and the rules that they've put in place for the NBA to operate in Orlando appears extremely strict, right? And that if that's what you have to do, in order to have sports, well, then there's going to basically be only a few places where that's doable, where they have a ton of money, right? Like the NFL, theoretically, because they have a lot of money, could do that. I don't know exactly if that's something they're exploring. Probably not. But how many sports leagues, how many organizations could do what the NBA is doing? And they're setting this incredibly high bar of this is what it means to have a safe sports experience. Everybody fly to one city on a massive resort, get tested instantly, and the moment you step out, you have to re-quarantine. You're monitored constantly. You're wearing rings that beep when you go within 6 feet of each other. I mean, all these things that they have in place aren't in place in other elements of the sporting world, right?
Right. No, I mean, you have guys that are having to take, when they accidentally step a foot outside the bubble, they've got to be re-quarantined, or they've got to isolate themselves. That's if Joe Schmo, eighth man on the cross country team, goes to his local bar, I don't think his cross country coach is going to be like, now where were you last night? Were you at the honky tonk bar? So you can't be around anyone. You can't go to class, and you can't run. No, obviously that was a very weird example. I apologize for that, but I don't. it's not, you can't scale it, right? To put it to, let's give it to maybe some conspiracy theorists out there who believe in Silicon Valley charm. Let's put it in that terms. You can't scale what the NBA, what the MLB, and what the major leagues are doing. It's not going to happen. It's not safe. I'm not going to feel safe, going to meets and being around sweating people and acting like everything is normal. And athletes shouldn't feel safe either. I know how bad they want to season, but it's just the sign that this wasn't going to work was what happened when states started opening up without masks, without saying you don't have to wear a mask going to businesses, and the cases went up. I don't care about the death rates. There's talks about other strains of this virus, and so that could be the cause of that. We don't have to get into that, but it's just there's no world where where health wise it makes sense to do this.
Mm-hmm. Let's change gears a little bit. A couple more stories I want to touch on in the last few minutes of the podcast. Unless you want to stay on that. Do you want to stay on that topic and do 20 more minutes on that? No?
I think I'm good. I've ranted enough.
Yeah. You save that one for Gordon next time.
Mm-hmm.
Deja Stevens will serve a 18-month suspension for whereabouts violations. The AU announced that this morning, which would keep her out through the Olympics and Olympic trials, obviously, in 2020. Yeah. What was your takeaway from this?
Well, like we discussed at the beginning.
2021, sorry. I messed that up. I don't even know when the Olympics are anymore.
You're okay. Yeah. Well, this punishment to me, because it was 3 violations within a year, and because it's a year and a half, which is a sentence is not super typical. It seems like it's either the full 2 years or it's put down to 1 year. But obviously the circumstances that they are giving an athletes, particularly American athletes, a 1-year suspension, I guess soon that will expire and to the point where you would miss the Olympic trials and therefore the Olympic Games. But if you're giving a U.S. athlete a 1-year suspension, there's a chance they could be back for the trials and the Olympic Games. So this 1.5-year suspension feels like it's a template that in the Coleman case could be applied. Sure, he could get reduced, but maybe they look at his rationale and whatever, maybe they don't believe it, and they say, well, we're going to give you the 1.5 years because it's reduced from the 2 years, but this is going to be a situation where basically it's a technicality, but because of the situation with the pandemic, you can still compete. I have no idea, but that's what I took away from this. Deja Stevens, she was an Olympic finalist at a pretty young age in 2016. I think she made the final maybe again in 2017, or at least she made the team. She hasn't been on that level the last couple of years, but a very talented athlete. The specifics of her case obviously are going to be different than Christian Coleman's. But it is my biggest takeaway, just because of when you think about whereabouts, we think of who's the biggest athlete with the whereabouts case right now. It's obviously Christian Coleman. So I look at it as, that could be an option for him. Whereas he's thinking, I just need to get this reduced down to a year. Well, no, there's still that 18-month option where you could, get your time cut back, but you're still going to be missing the Olympics. It's an apples to oranges type of a thing, but it was my first thought when I saw this come across the wire.
Yeah, same with me, because you're looking at precedent. Now, there's not just been one whereabouts case. There's been a bunch. Sure. But American athlete, recent violations, you're going to draw the line to, okay, well, what's going to happen when the most high-profile person in the situation has to receive a punishment? And the difference between 12 months and 18 months is everything. That is everything for Christian Coleman and his career, because that's the difference between, depending on when they date it, Olympics or no Olympics, right? I mean, that's the ball game. Now, I mean, I guess if it was 18 months, he could compete later on in the summer in 2021. But
it's all about, I don't
think that would be,
that, of course,
right? Yeah. So that would not be a consolation for him. So just something to keep an eye on as we move forward. Another topic, we have a 10,000 this weekend. I know the scroll says it's on Friday. The scroll says it's on Friday. It should be Saturday. My apologies there. But Molly Seidel racing a 10,000. Whoa, excuse me. Something went underneath my door and it scared me. All right, my son is stuffing stuff underneath the door. That is great. All right.
That happens. It happens.
Molly Seidel, Abby Cooper, Natasha Rogers headlining this 10,000 in Boston on Saturday.
Right. I'm loving seeing a marathoner like Seidel hop back on the track. I kind of wondered and posited a month or so ago, like, what are marathoners going to do now that there's basically no marathons, and it's probably do the next best thing for a long distance runner. It's run a 10,000. It'll be cool to see her back on the track. That said, Bowerman is kind of ruining the time trial track events for everyone else because last week, the day after Bowerman did their Portland Inner Squad 2, I believe like teams like NZ Elite and a couple other groups got together, and I forget where, and somewhere in, it was either in Arizona or Utah, I forget, but they ran like a time trial 5,000, and it was at a little bit of altitude, but the times were just comparably so much slower, or by comparison so much slower, that it was just kind of like, ugh, that's not impressive. So you feel bad because these Portland teams are going to get out there and run really, really fast, and other athletes who may not even be running their main events are going to do stuff, and it's just like, yeah, but Shelby Houlihan ran 14:23, so how am I supposed to feel about that? You know, it's just, it's tough. Like, I just feel like I can only, I've had the cream of the crop. Like, I feel like my standard now for getting excited about time trials is Bowerman Track Club and Bowerman Track Club only, and Donovan Brazier, of course, as well. Let me add into that. So anytime these get announced, I'm like, okay, 10,000. Do you think you can run like 30:15? Because that's pretty much my standard for excellence when it comes to track 10,000s. Now that I've seen Shelby Houlihan run 14:23, so no, I'm mostly joking. It'll be cool to see Abby Cooper, don't call her Abby D'Agostino, on the track, and Molly Seidel, her first race since finishing second at the Olympic trials. That is fun as well. So I like where track is going in the U.S. right now. Yeah.
All three of those women have really interesting stories. Seidel, the first race on the track since making the team. Maybe she has a big breakthrough. The Bowerman time trials and the other time trials are instructive in that we know people are able to be fit and in shape.
Yep.
Of course, Abby Cooper hasn't run one since college. She's been more in the 5,000, so maybe she sees her path to another Olympic team would be in the 10,000. And Natasha Rogers was below the radar, but she ran really well during the cross country season and was on a bit of a roll. So I'm curious to see what she does now. Remember, she finished top 3 in 2012, but didn't have the standard in the 10,000. Right. It was that weird situation where the top 3 was not the top 3. And that was when she was still at Texas A&M. So she's having a bit of a career renaissance. So she's someone to watch for. I know we get so focused on how fast Bowerman's running and how many people can they put on the team. And then you also have Huddle and Emily Sisson presumably taking a shot at the 10,000 team next year. That women's 10,000 is going to be mighty competitive, and it's going to have a lot of big names in it at the trials next year.
For sure. It got obviously a lot more interesting when Sisson and Huddle didn't make the marathon team, and we knew that would be the case. But Marielle Hall's very, very good now. And then you got the NAZ elite athletes also did make the marathon team, and Kellen Taylor, Steph Bruce. Very interesting race for sure. The combination of the marathoners who didn't succeed at or didn't get to the level, didn't get top 3 in their primary event, looking for some redemption, and the possibility of 5K athletes. I guess I don't imagine we'll see Carissa Schweizer, but she would be a massive game changer if that was a distance she also tried to take on. And then you got Emily Infeld, and there's just a lot of names. It may be not a super deep event for the U.S. on the international level, even though Molly Huddle, I think, can still be pretty darn good. And obviously Hall and Sisson. It's in the U.S. a very tough team to make in 2021.
Who do you think runs it for Bowerman? Do you think, because it comes before the 5,000, But do you
Hmm.
think Schweizer
Yeah.
tries to do both? Do you
Not
think
really.
Frazier tries to? Okay,
No, I don't.
she
I don't.
just
No, I,
waits.
I I don't think you sacrifice that. I mean, Swizer specifically. I mean, I think she's such a lock now in the 5,000. This is assuming health and all that, but if she's such a lock that it's not a thing where she needs to come in and, I mean, maybe she wants to double at the Olympics, right? And which is totally respectable. But not having that experience on the international level of the 10,000, I would think, you're running a risk of burning yourself out. And I know the time between the events of the trials is sufficient, but 10K takes a lot out of you. I think when she's as secure of a lock as I think she is, she'd be fine just doing the 5. But you're gonna have Gwen Jorgensen. Not that she's shown herself to be a factor yet, but it's just another name in there. Infeld will double, Hall will double, maybe Frazier, but she's been hurt. I mean, there's just a lot of names coming from the marathon and in other places that can make that a really, really unique event. And if Swizer comes in, that's doubly true.
Yeah, it's just hard to think that she's not going to be good in the 10,000 because
No,
she's
of course she'd be
good
good
at
at the 10.
good at
Yeah.
everything, good at everything else, and her chances of getting on the podium in Tokyo, I think, are the same in the 10 as they are in the
Really, you think
5.
that?
Yeah, because I mean, it's essentially the same race, right?
I
They're
guess.
not, they never end up that different.
Yeah.
I don't think the 10, well,
Yeah.
historically for the US, the 10's been better, right? You've been able to
Right.
sneak out some medals in the 10,000 where they haven't
Yeah. I
been
guess
able
that's
to
a
do
good
that
point. That's a good
in
point.
the 5,000.
I mean, she would
And
be
do you
the
want,
yeah.
well, I was just
Go
going to
ahead.
add, do you want to risk it in the 5? Because the 5 looks like a hornet's nest right now.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying get that spot and yeah, I mean, I guess she's so fit that's in Swizer that it's probably going to be a 5,000-meter race anyways for the 10K, if not a 2-mile race. And if you run 14:26, it's a pretty good shot that you're going to be able to run
Sure. But here's the
30,
5,000
30,
field.
50 or whatever. What's that?
Here's the 5,000. Here's the 5,000 field. Now we'll take Houlihan out of it because we assume she's going to make the 15. I mean, if something happened
Yeah.
to either Shelby Houlihan or Jenny Simpson in the 15, then that would obviously add another person who could make it in the 5,000. But in the 5,000, you'd have
Mm-hmm.
Purrier, you'd have Cranny, who just ran 14:48, right? You'd have whoever didn't make it in the 10. So maybe Huddle or Sisson doesn't make it in the 10 and go all out with nothing to lose in the
Yeah.
5. I mean, there's a lot, Rachel Snyder. There's a lot of people there in the
Yeah.
5. Not that there's not a lot of people there in the 10 too, but maybe you want to give yourself 2 chances instead of 1 to make the team.
Yeah. Tons of possibilities there. And, you can end up with a situation where a marathoner makes the 5,000 team. Just that's how solid those athletes
Mm-hmm.
are. And that's how, it just all depends on who puts their eggs in the 10K basket and who's just focusing on the 5. If Houlihan, for whatever reason, focuses on the 5K and says that's going to be my Olympic distance, I mean, that's
Right.
that's a totally different scope of the event. She controls everything there, and Swizer will be right there next to her. So basically, it's one spot open.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of all dependent on what they do. But it's fun to see those athletes come in and compete against marathoners for spots on the track.
Yeah, the 5 and the 10 remind me of how the 8 and the 15 were a couple years ago for the US, where just the depth got so crazy, and you're like, man, there's gonna be really good people left off of these teams.
Yep.
So I'm curious to see. And then I don't know when is let me look at when the steeple is, because obviously that would women's steeple. I think it might.
Wouldn't be a good podcast without Kevin checking the schedule. Luckily, I know you have it saved.
I have it up right now. Yeah, I'm looking at it. So women's 5,000 final is the last day, and then the women's steeple is on. Oh, never mind. Women's steeple final is on the same day as the women's 5,000 meter first round. I was just thinking if something were to happen to one of the. You always think contingencies here, right? If someone were to happen to the big 3 in the steeple, throw them in there.
Mm,
I know the odds of that happening are pretty low, but I don't know. Maybe someone clips the barrier. Maybe someone gets DQ'd, and then they come back later on in the meet. Those are my favorite. Those are my favorite trial stories. Are the people who, like
yeah.
Brendan Martinez, barely misses it, or something horrible happens, and they have to come back later
Yeah.
on in
Yeah.
another event and try to make the team.
Yeah. Or Brendan Martinez's case, the women's 800 explodes with 150 meters to go and takes out the entire
Jeez,
field. Yeah.
that that race, man, that race
Yeah. That
was
was,
absolutely insane.
yeah. I,
I just, yeah, I'll never forget that one. That one was
yeah. Yeah.
all the before, during, and after was just like whoa. And then I think the
Yeah.
men's race was after, and everyone was like, or maybe the men's race was before. I don't remember. They were on the
Just
same
totally
night.
overshadowed
I
it.
want to say. Well, I was just like, all right, well, like nothing. Like then you just thought.
Yeah.
I remember thinking with every other race then that like something was going to go wrong. Someone's going to get DQ'd. Someone's going to fall down. But that was pretty much the only one. And the men's race,
No.
it's like, oh, all right, well, Boris Berry made the
Oh,
team. Clayton Murphy made the team. Charles Jock rode
yeah.
his bike. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Let's do this. All right.
Charles
Well,
Shock.
we that was the story, right? Charles Jock rode his bike. I mean, everybody was talking about
He
how he rode
did.
his
No,
bike.
no, no. You're totally right. I just that was a good anecdote. That was kind of the anecdote to take from that one, because the Boris Berian working at McDonald's, that one had already been played out,
Mm-hmm.
and
Well,
yeah,
how was Charles Jock going to get to the meet? He lived in. He didn't ride his bike from Portland. He lived in Eugene. The parking situation is terrible. Why wouldn't he ride his bike?
yeah. It's just a great. You got to get the model of the bike. Is it a Swin? Is it a Huffy? Like what kind of? It really tells you a lot about the Olympian. So I understand pulling that out.
All right, we'll leave it there. FloTrackPodcast@gmail.com. Keep the emails coming. Thanks to people who wrote in this week. Maybe Gordon and I will read some more on Friday. Lincoln, it was a pleasure. Be safe, be well. Alon, thank you for producing. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
Bye.